One. Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elia Malamed at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, actually sitting in the library of the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation in full rabbinic garb. In fact,
you're looking good.
I had a comment. Somebody said it was too dark. It was too dark. The background was too dark, and I was wearing a black turtleneck. Blah blah blah. Now I'm wearing a white shirt and a white background. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Shaykh's Day School, Long Island. Rabbi Jeremy Komanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City. Great to see you guys. What can I tell you? This is a great parsha, amazing parsha, as always, filled with things that we truly have to wrestle with.
Wow.
Oh,
wow.
I'm not as good as you, Barry, in the pun department. Okay. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Jacob sends messengers ahead to his brother. Jacob is coming back from Lavan, from Haran. It's been 20 years. He's built his whole family. He's minus one child at this point, 12 boys, one girl. 11 boys, one girl at this point. And he has to confront his brother. And, the Bible's filled with the important symbolism. It's the boundary. It's the river. And he has a delegation. He sends his brother a message.
Hi, I'm home.
Ko Amar Avdecha Yaakov, to my lord Esav, thus says your servant Jacob, I stayed with Lavan and remained until now. I have acquired cattle, asses, sheep, and male and female slaves, and I send this message to my lord in the hope of gaining your favor. He speaks very loftily to Esav, and I haven't thought about that, but for another time. What his messengers come back and they say, "Banu malachicha, we've gone to your brother, to Esav, and he knows you're coming. And therefore,
well, so what's so important here is that when we think about Abraham going to rescue Lot in the Battle of the Kings, he took 318 men to fight nations.
Yeah.
And Esau is coming with even a larger troop. So Jacob is justifiably concerned, although I suspect this is just who Esau is. This is who he travels with. He's the leader of the pack.
He's a leader of a pack. Jeremy, are you more or less charitable?
You don't think that you didn't think this detail is just describing Esau's general clan? No, I think it's saying, he's coming with 400 guys, and he remembers that whole trick with the soup.
No, I think that he's with 400 guys probably because he is a nomad, but he's not really described as a farmer ever, as far as I remember.
So this is
Jacob is the same. Both of these guys. I mean, we know that.
But this is who he's traveling with, right? This is his clan.
Yeah, but I think that this is his clan. With 400, male 400 male retainers. We know, by the way, you're right. He doesn't seem to be a farmer because neither is Jacob or Yitzchak is described as planting and reaping. They're pastoralists. So yeah, that's right. He's a Bedouin. He's a ro'et zon. He's got his sheep, but. I think that's supposed to be an intimidating thing, and Jacob is appropriately intimidated.
Okay.
He's terribly frightened and troubled, and there's that wonderful rabbinic midrash. Why the doubled verb? Why terribly frightened and also troubled? Why not just one verb? He's afraid lest he be killed, and he was troubled lest at the thought that he might have to kill others. So that's great. It's a great little twist.
That's where Golda Meir got her line from.
No, okay. But
I just want to add one thing. The reason why he has 400 men is because of his lifestyle. You travel with everyone. You can't leave anyone. There's no place to leave the other people. When you go out to meet your brother, you're just traveling.
Well, I want to take issue with nothing here, except that, or maybe just, flesh out the picture here, which is that he's also got, how many wives at this point? He's got 4 wives, I think, right?
Who?
No.
Esau.
3,
Yaakov.
right?
No, Jacob.
Esau has 3. He has two locals and the daughter of Ishmael.
Okay, so he's got 3 wives, okay? And let's face it, that's significant. So Jacob has 4, he's got 3, and the text is silent here about any offspring, but not later. He does have offspring later, and the text is quite elaborate about
He has
his
12,
offspring.
right? He has
But-
one more at this time than Jacob does.
Exactly. So we'll hold off on that because I have a theory about this. But anyway, so this remarkable moment where Jacob is expressing his fear, and he says he turns to God. Vayomer Yaakov Elohei Avi Abraham, Elohei Avi Yitzchak, God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Adonai, God. Ha'omer Elai Shuv la'artzecha u'lemoladetecha. You have told me to return to my land and to my birthplace, Ve'tiva emach, and you will be good with me. Katonti, mikol hachasadim, u'mikol ha'emet. Beautiful song now in Israel. Katonti mikol hachasadim, u'mikol ha'emet. I'm not worthy. I'm small. Katonti, of all the goodness and kindness that you've given to me. Ki v'makli avarti et ha'yarden. As I walked over, I crossed over the Jordan with my staff. And now I'm 2 camps. So I mean, is that, how would you characterize that prayer or that supplication? Is he? I like the word katonti. I mean, it's I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of all the goodness that you've given me. Right?
It's kind of pathetic.
Really.
What?
Yeah.
How so?
I think that he's troubled because of all the patriarchs, Jacob comes with the most psychological baggage, which we don't always pay attention to when we try to unpack the events of his life. He has not seen his brother for 20 years. He remembers the last time he saw him, Esau had a murderous rage, either real or imagined. And now he's coming back and he's not sure if he has what it takes. And, the curious thing, why does he divide his camp into 2? Because he's pretty sure he's going to lose half.
Yeah.
Right? If you really want to protect it, you keep the camp together. There's safety in numbers.
Seriously?
When you divide it, you're already conceding that you're losing. Your casualty rate is expected to be very high.
Survivors. So maybe he should have gone on by himself and kept everybody else.
Well, but then, it's very hard to puzzle out the geography here. But it seems that Jacob sends everyone across the river into the land, and he's going to stay on the other side of the river, the non-Canaanite part, the non-Israel part,
yes,
where he's going to have the encounter with the angel.
Well,
Right?
actually,
So he actually sends everyone in front of him because, in the colloquial language, he's scared and you can fill in the blank.
well, first of all, I just want to say a couple of things about that. Number one, I'm looking up here, I'm trying to find, if I'm not mistaken, okay, you talked about the, what do you call it? The non-Canaanite side, and it sounds like they're crossing the Jordan. Well, the Yabok is, in fact, the modern Zarka River.
Yes, it's an east-west river, right?
It's an east-west river. So he's not crossing between Eretz Yisrael or Chutz La'aretz. He's not entering the land of Israel or being outside of it. He's north or south of an east-west river. So it just seems to be that it is the some sort of a border in Esau's territory. But about his fear, this is super interesting. I mean, it does seem he's worried about the 400 men. He's worried that he's going to get killed, or perhaps less than he killed. He does. I'm not sure that that's not kind of canny to divide the troops, so divide his family, so that even if one, at least somebody will survive. But the most creative, clever commentary by one of the classicals, the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, or Shmuel ben Meir of the 12th century, says, he goes across the river and the angel is there, he's left there. Why did he go back across the river after he'd sent everybody across? Because he was running away. He was trying to get the hell out of there and leave everybody to Esau's mercy, and the angel wrestled with him to make him not run away. I just think that's an extraordinary extraordinarily, a little, counterintuitive, maybe misses some of the power of
So
Jacob
what's interesting there
past.
then is that Jacob identifies the angel with God, right? He says, I've seen humans and divine beings. And then what you're suggesting perhaps is that what makes Jacob stand up and fight, so to speak, is God, that he doesn't have it within himself to do it alone because he's not really quite who he thinks he is, but he needs God's help, which is a stunning admission for him because the last time he mentioned God, he was making his deal about the 10%.
Okay, so let's go.
The idea that
rewind for a second. He says his prayer, Hatzileni na. I differ with you in your interpretation, although it's great interpretation to think about, which is that he's, I don't think he's pathetic here. I think that he's undergone his own transformation. He is now, there's a certain humility about him. He recognizes. Look, I just used this verse in a eulogy. So the katonti is a sense of gratitude, a sense of I'm not worthy of what I've received in life, and I think that's not pathetic. That's just a sense of gratitude. But and there's real fear, and it's not only fear, it's terror. He's terrified, and maybe strategically it may not be the best thing to do, but then he does a strategic thing, which is he goes to sleep. And then he sends a present. He sends a present. And what's the present? 200 goats, 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their coats, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 he-asses. And I just taught this week, so people who watch this can access this in my class that I recorded on YouTube. Because it's the ratios between female to male is very significant, okay? For the masculine ego, it's what is it? 200 she-goats to 20 he-goats. That's a 10-to-1 ratio. That's pretty good.
Right, but you have to think like an agronomist, I guess. You don't need that many males for a flock. You need the females.
You do, and this is the point. This is not the joke point, not that like the masculine in joke. It's I'm sending you a starter flock, okay? Because I, Jacob, I am a man with a family and a whole slew of sheep and animals and lots of possessions. I'm coming over the Jordan now. I'm coming over to you with my whole retinue. Okay, you too. It's like an advertising. You also can be a man. You also can be a family man. You also can be a nation. You can be a nation. Here you are. Jacob has gotten the message. There's 400 men. He's an army. He's a gang leader, basically. And so the message, the subliminal message in the gift to Esav is, you too could be worthy of maybe not the covenantal blessing that God has given to Abraham, that gave to Isaac, gave to me, but you can give, as Ben Summer just said, recently in our scholar residency, a parallel kind of destiny, which will be a nation. And lo and behold, by the end of the Parsha, Esav, if you look at chapter 36, verse 6, Vayikach Esav et nashav et banav et benotav. Esav takes his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his cattle, his livestock, the property acquired in the land of Canaan, and went to another land because of his brother Jacob. And I'm going like, where do we learn? Where do we get the idea that he's got a flock? Where do we get the idea there's a family? All of a sudden, by the end of the Parsha, Esav is a mirror image of Jacob. Esav is the nation. Esav's he's got his flocks. Esav's got lots and lots of things. And so what Jacob has done brilliantly, in a way that you might agree with me in this, and saying like, yeah, he's acting with subterfuge, with guile, with conniving, manipulation, the way he always is. He manipulated Esav and taught him that in order to be a figure in the Middle East, you have to have a nation.
Okay, so what I would say, Elliot, is that the way you presented it heightens for me how pathetic Jacob really is. Okay. He hasn't seen his brother for 20 years, and he's thinking, Esau, never, maybe times have been bad for you. Let me help you with my great wealth.
It's not pathetic.
Not that he's been there for 20 years. He was always a more resourceful person than I was.
Yes.
And therefore, he should be quite successful now. There's no reason to think he isn't.
What's
He's not
something
sending him
special
a
about
starter
gang of
flock.
400 leaders?
He's not sending him a starter
Yeah,
flock.
yeah,
He's
I
sending
find this,
him.
yeah.
He's sending him a bride because even now he's concerned that I was wrong, you were right, you were always stronger than me, and mommy's not here to protect me.
I don't know why, Elliot. I don't know why you would feel again. The starter flock thing seems strange to me because you know.
I've got a whole YouTube now on this.
Well, you can take
he
it
says,
down.
when Asaph says, people keep calling me here. When he says Yeshli Rav means I'm doing just fine. I mean, mute here
What
for a
is I'm
second.
doing just fine, you know. So is Mr. White in Breaking Bad. He was doing just fine, you know. He's a gang, you know. These you can be doing just fine by being ahead of a gang. Also,
But you know, also the other thing you have to keep in mind, Elliot, I think, is that you know when you were narrating your version, which I thought was quite intriguing.
thank you.
It reminded me of looking at American history from the point of view of the white European settlers and the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And from the white European settlers, we found this people, they were uncivilized, they were uncultured, they were uncouth, and we made them into people. And what do the Native Americans talk about? They talk about the Trail of Tears, right? Because you mistreated us, you brutalized us, and we'll tell our own story. Thank you. So I think you have to take a little bit with a grain of salt the story about Esau in our Torah, because it's not Esau's story. You know, we're going to get either this year or next to the story of Dinah. We promise our listeners.
We will. We'll get to it today. We should today.
And the remarkable fact of Dinah's story, as I was discussing with my wife earlier when she was doing her own preparation, is that Dinah doesn't say a single word. She has no story. The story is about her, but she has no voice.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's left to Midrash to compose the narrative from Asaph's perspective. So and there's no Midrash about that. So here I am. I'm going to say, well, you know, we all, anyone who has ever read the Torah has the right and the license to leap into an imagination, provided that you can find a proof text that you can substantiate what you're saying in the text. And so what I'm saying is the fact that he appears here with 400 men and he appears there at the end of the Parsha, basically as the mirror image of Jacob. He's got wives, he's got children, he's got possessions, he's got flocks, and the land is not big enough to hold both of them. You know, an echo of the Abraham Lot story. So he picks up and goes to Seir. And that's
so what's interesting.
Yeah.
What's interesting here, though, is that at the end, it emphasizes that Esau's ancestral land is to the east. It's Edom and Seir. So even though Esau marries the locals, and apparently he's the only one entitled to marry the locals, as Ishmael did before him, but the real locals, Shechem and Hamor, they're kind of treif. His land is not going to be our land. You know, just like Abraham and Lot separated, Esau and Yaakov are already separate.
So if you're writing the Torah from you're writing an Asaph Torah, okay, and you know you've seen that your father has given the covenantal promise to your brother, and you go off and you marry 3 women and have 12 children of your own and have lots of flocks, and then you go to this other area and you say, "This is my covenantal land. This is my promised land. I'm going to make a nation here," and in fact. They do. And in fact, later on in the Bible, in the book of Numbers, they're not only a nation, but they're a problem for Israel coming out of Egypt.
Well, that's what the Haftarah makes clear.
And that's Haftarah. Okay, so.
But we got to just say real quick about this. You know, if you want to go in this way, one way that I think does support you, and I love what you said about, you know, this is how interpretation works. You don't have to prove that it's the one and only reading of the Torah. You just have to prove that it can be found in the Torah, and that is how we do Midrash.
Well said.
But the fact, you know, we have this name change. Jacob gets a name change, and he becomes either as Barry said earlier, which was brilliant, you know, that he's not even who he thinks he is. He's actually somebody else. Or perhaps
let's talk about that. So he wrestles with the angel, and the angel blesses him. Barry, give us what you said. I mean,
well, so I think what's important is that it's not that the angel blesses him, is that Yaakov asks for his blessing. because it's the first time he's in his life that he could actually receive a blessing on his own account. He's not, taking the birthright for a bowl of pottage, and he's not preying on the frailties of his father to take the blessing that properly belongs to Esau, but he's fought all night with this angel. The angel has to go, and he is able to get a blessing from the angel. And then what's so striking here is that the angel's blessing is, Yaakov, you're really Israel. You're not really who you thought you were. You're someone else. And the question, though, is as we follow the rest of the Parsha, is whether that something else that he is something good. And this would be the segue to the story about Dinah, because he goes into this other land and, bad things happen and he looks away. And when his sons, Shimon and Levi, take matters into their own hands, literally, he's concerned that people are going to be ticked off at him and attack him, and he won't be able to defend himself.
I see in this. I think the idea, and I got to meditate on this whole deal. You're not who you think you are, and that's symbolized, of course, by the name change. And the name, as we know, when you get a new name in the Torah, that changes your whole life, as it does, I guess, when you're not even in the Torah. but the idea, I'm not going to let you go. Lo ashalecha ki im berachtani. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. I go in a different direction here. Maybe we talked about it last year, which is people who are involved in combat or involved in wrestling or involved in conflict. They need to find a way to end the conflict when it's a teku, when it's a tie, when there's no clear outcome. They have to come to a conclusion, and it's a ceremonial conclusion. The blessing is a ceremony, and maybe because the assailant is unknown, he is asking for the blessing. Forgive me for using the hockey metaphors, but when the players end, we're watching. Some of us, I dip into watch the World Cup. I don't know what's going on, but the losers,
they're playing soccer.
They play soccer, okay, and the losers lose and the winners win. And look, at the end of the Stanley Cup, they line up and they shake hands, okay? And the shaking of hands at the end of a conflict is a way of saying we terminate our hostility and we bless each other, okay? And so there's some, and here I don't want to go too deep in it, although I like what you said, Barry. That's going quite deep, which is you're not who you are. So after every conflict and then after every game, you're not who you are. Is that? Just reflect on this.
Then he's going to carry something physically with him for the rest of his life.
Okay.
He's damaged goods, right? His hip has been dislocated, however we want to understand it. Although I think it's worth repeating the observation that the word for tzela that appears here, which is going to be linked to the Gita Nashed, the sciatic nerve, is also what God takes from Adam to make Eve.
Yes.
So there's some kind of similarity there that's worth exploring perhaps another time.
Okay, but just one second. So he carries an injury with him all throughout his life. Okay, well, every athlete who's ever been injured, can remember the moment before and the moment after. Exactly.
So then we have to quote the Bratslaver Rebbe, who said that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart.
Okay.
And I think, that's predicated on this text in our Parsha, because after the battle, when Jacob finally leaves Esau, it's going to say he goes to Shechem Shalem. He's going to be whole. And it reminded me of that great verse in chapter 24, I think, or 23, 24, where God, after Sarah's death, it says God blessed Abraham with everything. Yes. That there's something about the paradox that we have to embrace, that wholeness means, and completeness means something other than what we often think it does. It doesn't mean undamaged. It means being able to knit the damage into the fabric of yourself.
Beautiful. So that verse comes after the reconciliation. They hug and they kiss. They are together, but they're both They're both wounded in some way.
But I just wanted to say, Elliot, to what you were saying before about Esav's own, like you're gonna write the Esav Torah. Well, he actually also, it's not a name change, but he comes into his own name. Like there's two descriptions of Esav, that he's hairy and he's Seir, Aderet Seir, and the place where he's going to set up his clan is Seir. All this is in modern day Jordan. I looked at my map here. Where is the book? It comes into the Jordan, just opposite a settlement in the north of Jerusalem.
It's north, right?
It's north of Jerusalem. In
Is it far north as Gilad?
It's in no, it's not. It's north of Jerusalem, in the West Bank, at a settlement in the territories called Shlom Tzion. A little bit, teeny bit south of that. It's called Darnia in Jordan and Shlom Tzion in Israel, or
and
in the
Edom and Seir are south of that.
So Seir's probably south of that. Anyway, so his one name is he's hairy Seir, and the other name is that he's red Edom, and he's got the lentil stew. So there's a way of reading this, if one wanted to go this way. This is that, like, Jacob, Yisrael, is going to come into his authentic self, and maybe Esav is going to come into his authentic self. The destiny that was planned for him is attained.
What I wanted to suggest, Jeremy, when you were talking about the land, is that the hairy and the red could be physical descriptions of the eastern, the land across the river, because at night or at sunset, the desert mountains turn red.
Yeah.
And the oases look hairy because they're green.
Look, I think that Jacob wants to civilize him. I think that Esav wants the love of his mother also, and we'll leave it there. Okay, so he arrives Shalem, as you said. That's chapter 33, verse 18, and things just go off the rails for Jacob, and of course for the family. And then we're not even yet at next week, but we have to talk about what happens, following this moment where he's whole by Yatzev Mizbeach. He sets up an altar, but she goes out. What happens? So talk about it. This terrible moment where she goes out and to visit the daughters of the land. Shechem, Bayarota Shechem ben Chamor, the son of Chamor, okay, aptly named. And rapes her. But
by the way, the Gemara in Tractate Makot says that bad stuff always happens in Shechem, and the context for that statement is that Shechem is a city of refuge. So it's a place that in their mind is associated with violence, sometimes accidental violence, like in the case of the accidental manslayer. But that once you start saying Shechem, and what's going to happen with Joseph as well, Joseph is going to go up to Shechem. What's going to happen there? More bad stuff. So I think that there's a way that the Torah is like giving us, if I said, like, what would be the same, something modern, and he went, he went to Auschwitz in Poland. You say, "Oh no, not Auschwitz," and then you just know that something bad was going to happen.
So the most horrible thing happens. That's
I think we have to really discuss what this is, because one of the things that I find most disturbing about this is that I think for a modern, the language is perhaps not as clear as we would like it to be. So I think we see it as a kind of rape. But I don't know that it was seen quite that way in ancient society. But what the claim of Shimon and Levi is, you don't do that to one of us, and your act is irredeemable. But we know in later Torah law that act can be redeemed. Now, again, to the modern ear, it's way off. You have the coercer, the rapist, marry the victim and live happily ever after, however that might work out. But I'm troubled by this idea here that there seems in Shimon and Levi's mind to be no redemption for what Shechem does, and it's not clear why that is.
Because they have defiled her.
Well, so Shechem defiled her,
Right.
And Shimon and Levi killed every single male in town.
Right.
So the question I would like to pose to you, Bar, is what do we think? You know, it's a great passage because first of all, as you guys just said, the Torah, the normative Torah law knows that when a rape happens of an unmarried, female, there is a financial and ethical duty to make it right. Again, as you said, a modern person would say, "Well, the rape victim is supposed to stay with the victimizer." No, that's crazy. But they think of it as we can make this right by promising to take care of you for the rest of your life and sustain you for the rest of your life, and you won't be poor and you won't be abandoned. You might imagine that a rape victim with the attendant shame or something like that in an ancient culture, she really would have been completely helpless, and so
She would
the
have been
punishment.
murdered. She would have been murdered. So the apologists for this story say, look, and for the law says the rape victim is actually murdered because the rape victim has diminished the honor of the family, and so they don't do an honor killing, God forbid, right? But and they don't find any way to have Shechem ben Hamor, reclaim any kind of ounce of honor. So they murder.
But he's trying to, because he says, and maybe even successfully, it says he spoke to her heart. So maybe he's trying to make it right, and maybe he even succeeds in making her feel better. We don't know that. But here's the thing: Shimon and Levi engage in this deception. They convince all of the Shechemites to circumcise. They're sitting around convalescing. 3 days later, they come in undercover night. They kill absolutely every man, as you said. Jacob says, "You've destroyed my position here among the people of the land." They say, "Can we we allow our sister to be treated like a zonah?" And that's the end of the story. And we don't know. The Torah does not tell us. It seems to me that Jacob has made a good claim, and that Shimon and Levi have made, in their own way, a good claim. Do you think that the Torah is saying, "Yeah, Shimon and Levi, don't stand for this. You guys are smart, clever, brave. You did a great thing"? Or do we think the Torah is saying, "Ugh, they're so violent, they're terrible. Jacob has the idea right. He's got to try and get along with people"?
Well, that's Jacob's idea at the end when we get to the blessing where he curses, in the guise of a bracha, he curses Shimon and Levi. But there's something insidious in what they do by making all the males become circumcised because they're offering the path of redemption. You're going to become just like us, and then Nebuch will kill everyone. Right? So Shechem and Hamor have come as close as they can to redeeming the situation. And granted, it's a terrible situation. And it's, I think the original word that it's spoken of is Nebalah, right? It's something outrageous. But the question I think remains is, what do you do in a case like that? And the curious thing about Dinah is that not only is she silent here, she's silent the whole rest of the Torah. There's nothing about her children, about a husband. She just is sort of like the orphan, so to speak, of Leah, the one girl among the 12 sons of Jacob, to whom something terrible happened.
A sacrificial victim here. Is she like Isaac?
On whose behalf?
On whose behalf? It's a good question.
So is it the problem of it's the tension of people coming to a new land and trying to settle down and figuring out how do you live with the locals, and you keep running against this idea that you can't live with the locals. And I think we see something like this play out today in the Middle East as well.
Well, it's I don't know if I've said this in our last couple of years, but I remember when I was at Pardes in 1991, I guess, studying this, and one of the teachers, American born but living in Efrat, we talked about this, and the American students, I think, in general, felt, arur apam ki az, as with Jacob's blessing about, the blessing / curse, cursed be their anger, for it is so fierce. We're like just very distressed at the Shimon and Levi, and one of the teachers was like, it's a rough neighborhood, and if you don't fight back in a demonstrative way, you're going to be victimized further. I mean, he basically had, not to caricature a kind of especially not at this moment, given everything that's going on in Israel, but a kind of, like West Bank settler mentality about, let's hit him where it hurts. And I just think that the Jewish culture of Israel and the Jewish culture of America might not be well suited to be able to read this story together.
Okay, the best we could say, I think, is that killing all the men will prevent something worse, right? That has to be what's driving Shimon and Levi. The question is, what is that they envision as being worse than the murder of everyone in town?
I have one further question, which I think it's a good question. I have one further one, which is that in a Bible story, in the Tanakh, which loves stories about small and clever outwit big, dumb, and slow, I think that there is a way in which the Bible loves stories in which, kind of the clever Jew outwits the big, dumb Gentile and praises, like Ehud, and I can come up with others. And I'm open to the possibility that the Bible thinks that Shimon and Levi were brave, resourceful, and quite clever.
I think our conversation here is what the Bible wants from us, which is to really have terrible difficulty. This is not the moral. This is not a moral guidebook for how you behave in these situations. There's no law here. It's completely lawless, and there's massacre with its consequences. The consequences will last generations for Jacob in the land also, and well, not really. I mean, they go down to Egypt, but the memory of this moment will last. The way that every single massacre, we live in a country where there's daily shootings and daily massacres, or there are periodic spasms of violence. And none of these places are the same after 4 decades afterwards. And so the place of Shechem is, will remain that place, as you said before. So,
but
I don't think there's any normative moral message from this that we can take. And we have to be.
Well, I think there might be one. But the other thing is, if I'm not mistaken, there's no further reference to this after Jacob says his piece. Right? We never associate Shechem with Dinah again.
Well, it'll echo somewhere later on in Joshua and Judges, I'm sure. But we have to come to our end. We're
so I just want to add one piece before I conclude that there is what the story points out is the limits of law. The claim of law is that every situation has a rational or reasoned response. And life tells us otherwise, that there are some situations that do not have a rational or reasoned response. And an alternative must be found, and sometimes that alternative is quite cruel and barbaric, except that what the alternative may actually be worse. And that might be the message here.
Very, very powerful message. Okay, so the Parsha concludes with the genealogies of Esav and Ishmael, I think, right? And
that's only there for the Zohar.
Exactly. So
it's only there for the what?
The Zohar.
It signals to us.
First of all, that's big. It's huge in the Zohar. Very, very important. But note that Esav's descendants include Amalek.
Yeah, but we don't want to leave on Amalek. We just want to say that this is a transition. We're now that end coda in the Parsha will transition us to next week, to Joseph and the novella that begins. This was difficult Parsha to think about, but we're glad that people stayed with us and watched us and listened to us as we wrestled with this. We wrestled with this Parsha. We want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat. Thank you so much for joining us. Send us your comments. We appreciate them. Thank you so much for that. Everybody, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.